Delighted to say joining me for the whole show today is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Good morning to you. Started last hour talk about me ranting about everything being closed because of the snow. Yep. Can we talk about pubs closing as well? We've just talked to Justin Urquhart-Stewart's an economist about this issue, but we were promised again and again there would be help for hospitality, weren't we? We know they're the most hardest hit when you get things like lockdowns, even when they were allowed to open, when they had that nonsense, arrows showing which way to walk to the toilet and tables meters and meters apart. They weren't even breaking even, but they were at least able to open. People haven't gone back to the pub like they used to. They're not, often a lot of people aren't, places like London and Manchester, they're not going into their offices, they're working from home a lot. So they're not going to the pub after work and doing that or going to restaurants. And we are seeing that, and we've had train strikes the last few years, and you get a bit of bad weather, and they are being hit across the board. They are struggling. People are used to paying virtually nothing in a supermarket for their pint rather than paying cost it costs for a pub to provide it. National minimum wage increase, the national insurance increase, and now business rates going up. All these promises of help. The exact opposite's happened. They're hitting them really hard. How worried should we be about this?
I think we should be really worried because the pub sector in particular has been hammered for decades now. I mean, the smoking ban hit them pretty hard. You then think about the last...
I was in favour of that.
But it was
I couldn't go into pubs.
But things were moving, not to sound like a certain someone from the IEA, but things were moving in that direction anyway in terms of, many non-smoking pubs and so on. But nevertheless, did hit them hard. A lot of pubs which only really existed just as a kind of, lean against the bar, kind of boozer, had to shut down. You then kind of fast forward and you have, of course, the financial crisis, never good for hospitality. But now, particularly the last 5 years, that COVID, energy prices shooting up, general kind of economic chaos leading to more and more pressures being put on the sector. It's not alarmist to say that we could lose an enormous amount of our pubs basically for good. And as we've all seen from various high streets, when a pub closes and then quietly gets reopened as flats or whatever, they don't tend to come back. So I think we've got to take this seriously, not just because of the people who work in the sector and the people who, for no fault of their own, working very hard and yet are potentially going to lose their livelihoods as a consequence of avoidable policy decisions from government, but also their social role in British life. I mean, everyone, even politicians, will want to be quite sentimental about them, always want to be photographed pulling a pint in their local and so on and so forth. But they will go if they carry on down this track.
the foreign presidents when they come to visit to the pub. I mean, this is the thing, the rite of passage as well. I feel very strongly about, you want your 16-year-old in a pub drinking illegally. I'm sorry, you do, then, rather than sitting at home scrolling, either playing on a video game or looking for likes on social media.
Or drinking illegally somewhere else.
Exactly, in the park. Seriously, I think they're a really important rite of passage. But kids are sort of meeting with, they're meeting older people, and just I don't know, just that socialising aspect of things. I think it's really, really sad. Bearing in mind also a big part of our tourism industry, which is a huge part of our economy. You're Americans, you're Chinese, they come over, they want to come to a British pub, they really do. Again, it's all part of the economic doldrums we're in. We've got a date for the next statement. I think it's March the 3rd we're going to hear from Rachel Reeves. I mean, never a good thing when Rachel Reeves gets up in the Commons, is it?
Doesn't bode well. I mean, it's funny whenever Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer say, I'm not going anywhere and there's more to come. I don't think they realise how sinister that sounds to most of the country.
What did you make, actually, with Keir Starmer at the weekend? I was saying on the show yesterday, it took me 3 goes. I don't even think it was a jet lag, it was just Keir Starmer talking. But
I've exactly the same feeling.
I tape it, he's going to do an interview about half an hour. I mean, it felt like 4 hours. It probably took me 4 hours to watch it. Just like, he's still talking. I always have this thing with Keir Starmer, it's like, 3, 2, 1, back in the room. And he was saying, look, he's not going anywhere, he'll be in office this time next year. Do you think he will?
No, I don't think he does either. I think
I don't even think he cares anymore.
I've started to almost feel sorry for him.
No, this is the worst thing.
Exactly. It's like that kind of really late stage sort of Rishi Sunak sort of period where you think, oh, bless him, he's trying his best. But his best isn't good enough, unfortunately. And I don't think he believes that he's going to be around in 2027. I don't think his MPs believe he's going to be around in 2027, hence all the plotting. I don't think the public believes.
Is it a good idea for them to get rid of them? I mean, because at the end of the day, it is quite difficult to get rid of a Labour leader. Much harder than a Tory Tory leader, but they did that deliberately, especially one in office. Yeah. But also, crucially, be careful what you wish for, because if the Labour leadership is decided by Labour Party members, they vote for Jeremy Corbyn, and this time round they would vote for the likes of Ed Miliband. In fact, they'd probably vote for Zach Polanski of the Greens if they had their way. But my thing is, even if they went for the more sane options, the Wes Streetings and others, I'm not sure, given his stance on things like Palestine and trans kids and that actually Wes Streeting. I mean, if that's the sensible wing of the party, God help us.
I mean, that's the one thing that Keir Starmer has in his corner, which is, despite Wes Streeting going and putting some very punchy lines on the media, which gets lobby journalists very excited but completely bypasses most of the public who have much better things to do than listen to those kinds of things, there's no one really properly waiting there. I mean, Andy Burnham gets talked up. He's not even in Parliament, which it would be necessary.
Well, there's talk of him getting a seat. And he's got his allies on the National Executive Committee. He could get a seat at the next local elections when they, at the same time, running a by-election if someone stands down.
Andy Burnham, this is the man who tried and failed to lead the Labour Party twice. This is someone who 1 minute was a sort of Blairite/Brownite, then suddenly has become a kind of born-again, soft left to socialist now that he's in Manchester. I get that he is the sort of shiny new thing, and anyone looks more human and normal and relatable when stood next to Keir Starmer.
I think he's been a good mayor.
I'm sure he has.
That's a different job.
But at the same time, it's a different job, and also the fact that the Labour Party are going back to him now it tells you something, and I don't think he would survive.
Emily Thornberry. I want Emily Thornberry to be.
Yes, me too. Not because I wish the Labour Party well, though.
Just for the lols.
Yeah.
Just for the lols. Anyway, should we talk about international affairs? What do you make of Keir Starmer refusing to say that Donald Trump's capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro, who pleaded guilty in a New York court yesterday, broke international law? Does it matter?
No, I mean, nothing.
Seems to matter to his backbenchers.
It does matter to his backbenchers, but I think it's because they're used to just purely kind of moralising on the international stage rather than thinking about it in any clear-eyed fashion. Is it embarrassing that Keir Starmer, Mr. International Law, the only thing he's ever seemingly sincerely cared about is this stuff, is now stuttering to condemn something which, let's be honest, in the framework of international law didn't really pass muster? Yes, of course, that's really embarrassing. But at the same time, what are people expecting him to do? To sort of rail against Donald Trump, to say that he's not going to let any of the White House ministers in the country until he reverses his course, particularly in the context.
That's what David Lammy would have wanted.
No, exactly. Is he going to chain himself to the railings outside the US Embassy, which is something a David Lammy before government, you can imagine saying? Of course not. Not least because they want to get this deal over the line in relation to Ukraine, which obviously they're talking about in Europe today. So
everyone's tiptoeing around Donald Trump. Is this because you're now in the big league, and you're playing with the big boys, and the realpolitik hits home? Because actually, this whole notion, this is my thing, this whole notion of this international law is utterly meaningless. Laws only count if you've actually got someone who can enforce those laws. We can't really enforce any international law on China. That's why no one cares about millions of Uyghur people being basically in concentration camps and being forcibly sterilised. No, certainly the pro-Palestine lot don't seem to care about those Muslims. Not bothered by about them at all. We can't really. Could America? Could the West stop Xi Jinping invading Taiwan? Probably not.
And when people invoke international law at the moment, I mean, it's just, you think they're living in a different sort of era. I mean, the whole spell of it.
Well, they think a statement to the UN, that's the end of the matter.
No, exactly. They think that as soon as the tanks roll into a sovereign territory, that the number one thing you need to do is get the lads together and write a nice communique. It makes no difference. We all know this. It's ridiculous. That is not to say that you should be relaxed about revisionist wars or imperialistic wars. The point is that you judge them morally, politically, and yes, there should sometimes be consequences for them, as we've seen in relation to Ukraine, the West getting behind Ukraine to differing degrees, backing them, arming them and so on and so forth. But that's not because they were legally compelled to do so. They felt morally, politically, geopolitically compelled to do so.
Well, I was going to say, how you do it. Morally is all very well as well, but there's also fundamentally it's about your own country's strategic interest. Yeah. That's what Britain has always done, like the balance of power. We don't want one big power on the European continent, and that's how we've always operated our international foreign policy. But this is the thing. I mean, is there a big difference though? And this is where the Greenland issues come up. Donald Trump making threats, and he's made threats to Canada, to Mexico, to Greenland, to Colombia, to Venezuela, you name it, threatening everybody. There is a big difference, is there not, between him threatening, Canada and Mexico and Greenland, and and more specifically Greenland in the last 48 hours, than threatening Colombia or Venezuela and going in. We are talking about narco-terrorists. We are talking about criminal, dictators with no democratic mandate. That is a different thing. We've got this idea that there are sovereign nations, and that's this sort of. I mean, by the way, I love the fact the left only recognise a sovereign nation and the need to protect their borders when there's an invasion by Donald Trump. Yeah. They don't seem to mind they don't care about nation states whatsoever. Otherwise, then they want open borders for any illegal migrant who wants to rule or be part of the EU. They seem to change their tune on that. But at the end of the day, the idea that a nation state like Iran, like Venezuela, like Kim Jong-un in North Korea, that has the same legal right to sovereignty to be recognised and respected as a democratic nation state with a democratically elected government. But that's rubbish. They don't. I don't recognise the sovereignty of dictators.
I mean, there's clearly a distinction to be drawn there, absolutely, and it gets back to our point about how you judge these various interventions when stacked up against each other. That being said, I think there is something in being very cautious before you go into another country, take out its leadership, because it is an affront to sovereignty in one shape or form. Even if there is a lack of popular sovereignty there is such a thing as setting a precedent. But there's also the fact that we've seen from recent history that these things can unravel quite quickly, which in a way that isn't good, not just for sovereignty, but also for the people in those countries, that you create a vacuum that might be filled by even worse people. You can create civil war, more instability. So all of those things should be taken into account. And just because you don't like or even despise the leadership of a particular country, one has to be a little bit careful about how one does this. And also, but at the same time, I think it's quite clear that if you've got a state which is attacking you, or if you've got a state which is running some sort of criminal enterprise, the idea that there would be no consequences from that whatsoever is absurd. The idea that there won't come a point where some action might need to be taken is absurd. And what we can only really hope is, because as I say, I'm very nervous about this particular intervention, but I think the best that we can hope for is similar to other military measures Trump has taken in recent years. It's very get in and get out. It's make your point and then leave,
which
rather
I think,
than get bogged down to
what
the extent
we probably should have done in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, you want to make problems for us, then we will make problems for you. But I think they should have finished. I mean, frankly, Iraq. There should never have needed to be an Iraq war in 2003, because we should have finished it, under George Bush. Frankly, a first one round when it came to after the invasion of Kuwait. But there we are. In terms of Nicolás Maduro basically saying, look, I'm a prisoner of war, his wife saying, I'm the first lady of Venezuela. Well, good luck that, sweetheart. I say you're not even the first lady in your prison cell in Brooklyn right now. But Donald Trump then basically saying Greenland's next. The Danish Prime Minister, she has said, look, that would be the end of NATO. Greenland is part of Denmark, part of the Kingdom of Denmark. It's a democratic nation state, an ally of the West of the United States, part of the European Union, part of NATO. Would that mean the end of NATO if he did go in? Do you think he would go in?
I mean, it would be a crisis of it, certainly. I mean, the idea of Donald Trump sending the American armed forces to kind of forcibly take Greenland, I think, is genuinely fanciful. I think what is more likely here is that, as we saw, in the run-up to him,
I reckon I could take Greenland, to be honest.
Well, this
is
the other. I mean,
I reckon you could take Greenland quicker than you could, I don't know, take Leicester.
I mean, it's a large. I mean, what was it, about 60,000 people?
56,000. Apparently,
that's a large football stadium in this country these days. So it's that's a telling detail. It's obviously strategically very important. It's obviously very important to the Greenlanders, who do have autonomy and should have a voice in all of this, even though they're being kind of took out over their heads.
Well, it's the same way as Falklands, as far as I'm concerned. It's up to the people of the Falklands. End of.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing that we should remember. The question is how seriously, I suppose, we should take this. I think this is the opening salvo in a sort of negotiation. And it's difficult with Trump because he says a lot of crazy things, and sometimes they're meant for effect, and sometimes he means them, and sometimes he doesn't. I think that is part of the method. You keep people guessing.
And it does undermine him.
Things particularly stable.
It does undermine him when he's done something which actually I think will be for the good of the Venezuelan people, and whatever works out. I think it's going to be better than Maduro. And he does something which I think I'm perfectly happy to have this dictator taken out. I'm perfectly happy with this action. But then he makes threats against the democratic state. You think, oh, come on.
Yeah.
This is the thing. But this is my thing. I said, I would have voted for him. But You know, he's not even been in office for a year. Doesn't it feel like he's been in office for about 5 years? It's just so Donald Trump dominated. But anyway, we shall see. I'd want to hear your thoughts on this. Give us a call. European leaders, not this is Danish, others have warned that Donald Trump is making any attempt to seize Greenland would spell the end of the EU. Of NATO. What is your reaction to that? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Do you care? Do you not care? I mean, does NATO have any meaning anyway? And is this just about realpolitik? And frankly, if you're the biggest boy on the block, you can do whatever you want. Is that the reality? And have we just been pretending that isn't, by pretending we've got a rules-based order and pretending the UN makes a difference? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all that. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Let's turn attention slightly closer to home. Prime Minister, I mean, he's barely in the country these days, is he? He's attending the Coalition of the Willing meeting in Paris, hosted by Emmanuel Macron, meeting with European allies in a very snowy looking Paris by the looks of it. It's about, basically what they're going to do to sort of try and get a peace deal in Ukraine. Everyone keeps talking about a ceasefire. I don't think a ceasefire is the issue. I think the end to the war is the issue. I think a ceasefire in lots of ways would help Russia more than it would help Ukraine. But I mean, this coalition of the willing, willing to do what is the question mark. And there's been talk that we would actually have boots on the ground supporting peace, but everything really rests on, will America, and there are American representatives at one of these meetings for the first time, and they are, Jared Kushner and also Steve Witkoff, so people who are actually close to the president. But it's about America stepping up and being that backstop, basically guaranteeing Ukrainian territory. Do you think we've got any chance of seeing an end to the war this year? I mean,
it's difficult to say because of the facts on the ground. I mean, Russia, it's not entirely clear to me they want peace. And if they do want peace, they want it in such humiliating terms that it would never be acceptable to the Ukrainians or the Europeans, even to certain people within the Trump administration, I dare say. So it's remained an open question. I mean, as we've gone over the Christmas period, Russia has continued to take territory, it's continued to shell Kiev. And also, unfortunately, at this stage in the war, this very grinding, attritional conflict, Russia seems to have the upper hand. So that's there. So the question is there any kind of countervailing pressure that can be brought on them from the Americans or anyone else? You've got an America which is very reluctant to get further involved. I mean, this coalition of the willing has always been... they've never said the quiet part out loud, but it was like they can only really do it with at least American air support, if not, much further support. So we're stuck in this loop once again. I think the future where Ukraine's security and defence is concerned will be primarily about how much can you build up its own domestic military, make sure that as part of this agreement there aren't those absurd limits being placed on it by the Russian side, as were in earlier drafts of this peace agreement. But everything beyond that, I think Ukrainians have had to learn that whether it's the Americans or the Europeans, to be perfectly frank, the West have often been very flaky and two-faced allies, where Europe in particular, they're great at putting out tweets and having a press conference and saying
and hugging people,
Ukraine,
big on hugging people.
But they don't back it up, and worse than that, they continue to buy Russian fossil fuels and therefore fuel the war machine. So we'll see. But it's been a mess from start to finish.
At the end of the day, again, I think the number one thing is, by the way, we need to get an awful lot of people off welfare in this country, and we need to get an awful lot more people into our military and spend a lot more on our military. We are in very dangerous times, and we need to be prepared for it. And you can't just go, I think I'll have a sort of some sort of super tanker ship or something. I can't. You're going to buy some fighter jets just off the shelf. No, these things take years and they cost many billions. We are going to have to get to grips with all that. Bearing in mind, we are a country, as we discussed a bit earlier, where we get a bit of snow and we apparently grind to a halt. Now, look, I'm looking out over London. We haven't had any snow. We're a bit frosty in the garden. Put the big jacket on today to get in, big coat on to get into work. Large parts of the country under full snow warnings, proper blanket of snow, people digging out their cars and really struggling. But once again, we've had loads of schools closing, loads of people told to stay at home because of the cold snap. I mean, can we take ourselves seriously as a country if a bit of snow? And I'm sorry, it's not like we've had 4 foot, for goodness sake. I mean, even if, again, you get to work late, right? I get that. Or maybe here's an idea: it's going to snow tomorrow. Maybe get up early, and allow for the fact it's going to take you an extra half an hour to get to work. But particularly kids at school, the message we are sending is, it's a bit difficult so don't bother. Well, why are you all surprised when in 10 years' time those kids don't turn up to work on a Monday morning because it's a bit drizzly?
Yeah. No, I think I completely agree. It's subtle, isn't it? But it is a problem. We've become really risk averse. We've become
You've got a
really
sniffle,
kind of
don't go
coddling.
into work, you might give everyone flu and they'll die.
And it trickles through, doesn't it? I mean, if it's so easy to close the school, you're sending the message that the school being open doesn't really matter too much.
Yep.
And
we know that after lockdown.
Yeah. And that works all its way up to how people approach the world of work and everything else. And it's just a bit pathetic, isn't it? I mean, it wasn't that long ago, and it sounds a bit sentimental and chocolate box, but people in Britain would kind of pride themselves on sort of, muddling through in difficult circumstances.
But also, again, like, okay,
it's a bit of a sniffle and a bit icy out. And
but also, not every teacher can get in to the school. Okay, well, fine, not every kid can get in. There might be a reason. Some people can't, fair enough. But also, there are lots of people who do need to go to work. They can't have their kids off school. I just find it absolutely true. If it's too hot, if it's too cold, if it's too rainy, if it's too snowy, if it's too this, it's too windy. I mean, we've become so risk averse and so excuse orientated.
Yeah.
The whole country is being run by the people who just can't cope anymore.
It's not even the snow. I mean, there's no snow in London, but schools are closing left, right, and centre from what I hear because for all the reasons that you've been talking about. Yeah. So it's not as if this is an unusual weather event that we've become used to.
Winter.
It's dipped below zero. That's all that's happened, and yet everything is.
Seriously, I'd love to hear from you. Your kid's school is closed, or you've don't not going to work, or maybe you are snowed. If you are genuinely snowed in, absolutely can't possibly make it to work. Justify it. Give me a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number.